We got some people. All right, so perfect. So we see we got some people dropping in here, which is amazing. We always a little bit nervous about the IT and everything. We're hoping that our international intended parents, our Europeans, is going to figure out that we are an hour earlier because of, I think,
Yes.
daylight saving now. Janice, is that
Yeah, daylight savings. We finally get some more light here in the US.
right for US based people? We messed up our Europeans a little bit. We're hoping that they can figure out how to join us here as well. But
Yeah.
I see we have a good bunch of you already here, which is awesome, and which I
Fantastic.
knew because this topic is amazing, and we have the amazing Janice, which we'll introduce a little bit in a minute, to talk about this amazing topic of matching and how that works, intended parents, surrogates, expectations, all of these big questions of what can I wish for without being overbearing? What should I wish for? Is there yes and no's of that? So we're going to cover a lot today. For the ones that are here now, there is a Q&A button somewhere, well, a Q button, I should say, question button somewhere on your screen, depending on if you're on your iPad, iPhone, computer. Is there any other companies for phones, etc.? I'm sure there are. I just know Apple, so that's why it's always an iPhone or iPad in my presentations. But if you have your screen there, try to find that Q&A button, because you can ask questions and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. But feel free to keep them coming throughout the whole presentation. And we also do have, I think they're anonymous, or they are anonymous, not to us always on this side, but to each other they are. So only we can see the questions. So please feel free to do that and take this opportunity to, especially with Janice, to ask a lot of key questions. All right, I'm going to start a little bit, and let's see if everybody, I hope you can see this. If you can't see this, if something seems weird, please just give us a shout out. Janice is giving us the thumbs up on that Q&A if there's something that seems to be a bit weird. All right, so let's kick this off, and people, especially Europeans, can join us if they got the message about the earlier start. These are just a couple of pictures, obviously, of intended parents and surrogates that we love to kind of kick off the webinar with, because this is what it's all about, right? Actually, the little baby inside is also what it's all about. But in this kind of sense, with the matching, this is what we're going to discuss today. How does Janice and her team create these amazing curated matches between intended parents and surrogates? So we'll have to just show them off. And I especially love this picture. I say it in almost every webinar, but I just love that really symbolic kind of thing of the intended parents and having this like angel surrogate with them doing that important work is just amazing. All right. So today's schedule, we're going to shortly do an introduction. We're already halfway there. We're going to talk shortly about Hatch and PFCLA, just to introduce a bit of who we are and who we're kind of speaking to here today. We won't get too long. We don't want to get too advertisements kind of central with this. We're going to talk about the surrogate and IP matching process, obviously, which is why you're all here. And there are basically 3 steps of that, more or less. An initial meeting between the match specialist and the intended parents, also called the welcome call, basically. Presenting a surrogate and IP profile to each kind of party in this match. And then the actual match meeting, which I usually describe as a weird first date. But Janice, I know that you and your team are also very good at breaking the ice, actually. But initially it can be a bit like, everybody's new to each other. It's a bit of like sweating. And I know that I was thinking in my own journey, what should I wear? Is this background okay on the Zoom? Like, will she think that I'm a horrible person because I don't have like a super nice background? So, a lot of feelings, I think, involved in this meeting, right, Janice?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most important meetings of, an intended parent's life. So there's a lot of thought, and details that go into it.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to discuss that a little bit and how Janice and her team makes that a bit more kind of easier, or much more easier and more comfortable. And then we're going to do a Q&A, like I mentioned. Keep the questions coming if you do have them. Janice is the director of our matching department, which she will mention a little bit about later. And I'm a 2-time father through surrogacy and egg donation. So really feel free to take that opportunity. We're very open about everything, which is great, and very transparent. So we can always ask us questions. Yeah, more importantly, I mean, I am a 2-time father, so I'm European. Actually, I live outside of the US. So I mainly work with our international intended parents for surrogacy or egg donation. Then we have a great domestic team as well, of course. That would be weird if we didn't have that, being a US agency. I'm the international manager here and a two-time father. And Janice, please introduce yourself a little bit briefly.
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Hatch for about 10 years. I live in Los Angeles, about an hour and a half away from the clinic, PFCLA. And let's see, just personally, I am married. I have three little boys, and I've been a surrogate between, completing my family. So it was right after my oldest son. I loved being pregnant and I really wanted to help a family. We thought we were done having our children, little did we know. But I got to help a beautiful couple that is international, actually. They lived in Spain. And it was an incredible experience. I was matched with the right family. So after I completed my journey, I really wanted to transition to the matching department because at that time I was in case management. I live for matching. I love seeing the spark between intended parents and surrogates during that first initial meeting. And I'm just really excited to guide intended parents through the matching process day to day with
Yeah.
Hatch.
Yeah, and I love seeing you do that. Like I haven't seen you in an actual match meeting, of course, because I shouldn't be there. But it's really nice to know every time you speak about it and now your team speaks about it, you're really so passionate about it and fighting that not only like next available match, but really like the suitable match and who's gonna long term have a great journey together. I just love seeing your kind of passion for that.
And some fun fact, Edvin, I know you're aware, but for everyone joining us, everybody at Hatch, all our amazing, incredible women that we work with have all been surrogates. So
Yeah,
that's a really special aspect to working with Hatch because we have gone through a surrogacy ourselves. We've been surrogates and we know how important it is to go through this process. We can understand the perspective of intended parents going through this process and what they have gone through to get to, the surrogacy point. And we really want to make sure that we take great care of our intended parents and of our surrogates because it's a long journey and it's really important that, both parties feel comfortable through this journey and feel really good support, through each
yeah.
step.
Absolutely. And I think I heard somewhere that across the agency with staff, they've done over 50 surrogacy journeys together, I think. Like not together, but like
Wow, yeah, that's
so
amazing.
that's amazing for sure. So I agree with you. It gives an additional really nice insight into what everybody's going through here, which I do think is a great resource to have. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Thanks for lifting that. All right, so let me tell you just very briefly about Hatch and our clinic, Pacific Fertility Center, which we work very closely with.
Mhm.
So basically, when you go out there and you research agencies and clinics, you'll find that the vast majority of them are either just an agency or a clinic, or they might have partnerships with other clinics or agencies that kind of funnel you through. But we wanted to create something much more inclusive than that. And today, Hatch and PFCLA, which is the short for Pacific Fertility Center Los Angeles, which nobody can say more than once, I feel like, together we've created a program where we really want to offer intended parents that wanted a really all-inclusive experience, something
Mhm.
that basically brings together the two worlds of agency and clinic very close to each other with one team that works closely together with past relationships they can kind of build off of, with the medical team that's very close to the agency, which is one of the most important things. I know, Janice, you love this, and all the lovely
Mhm.
ladies at the agency, they all really love that we have doctors in house that can actually look at surrogates' previous medical records, do a uterus order, a uterus lining check, and look at that assessment and do kind of an assessment on that end. We can do a lot of things earlier with the doctors because we do have our own clinic in that sense. And we wanted to create that with a financially beneficial package because, as we all know, surrogacy especially, but even egg donation, it's pricey. It does get up there, especially adding on the legal part, etc. So we also wanted our financial packaging to be a part of that peace of mind program, which we call it. So we have an all-inclusive packages, agency and clinic, where we really try to give intended parents what they want, which we believe is peace of mind, knowing that
Mhm.
this huge investment, not only financial, but emotional and time-wise, it's going to lead to something great. And that's the idea behind the Peace of Mind program, basically. So yeah, just a little bit about that background so you know who we are here. And this is just some fun facts about Hatch. It always baffles me every time I do this because I was 2 years of age when this agency was created. So for me, it's amazing that I'm here today, and that this agency has been running actually for 34 years now, I believe. So we should change that number now again. 55 countries served means that we have clients for over 55 countries so far. and not at the same time, but coming and going, which is amazing. I was actually one of them. I had one child through Hatch actually, and also two kids. Both of my kids were born through the courtesy of the clinic, and my son, who's 11 months old, was born through the courtesy of Hatch as well, which is amazing. So I guess my last little boy is somewhere in this mix of 3,300 happy, healthy births. Success rates are fun to look at when they're high. They rarely give you all of the insights of what it actually means. So I think one important thing is to actually ask the agency what the success rate means, instead of just kind of getting that number. So we usually look at, this is a donor surrogacy cycle. So it's really important to differ a little bit from using your own oocytes, creating embryos. It's a heavily medical question. And not that egg donation isn't medical, but in that sense, we can control more of what is the actual group that we're using, age, and we look at age and background. So I think if you are using your own oocytes, it's a very much a doctor consultation that you need to figure out your chances of success, especially with embryos. But we do have a high success rate. We do focus a lot on safety. Surrogate screenings is a webinar we had, I think, last month or a month before that. Also very important for the success, but obviously also Janice's work to match the right people together and have that match stick out to the end and become something great. Like Janice mentioned, all staff experience surrogates and intended parents actually also. So all staff that are not female here have actually been intended parents through this journey. And once again, having daughters in-house, a deal breaker or like a game changer in my opinion. I've tried both models, didn't have that the first time. The second time I did have Dr. Shaken pre-screen, etc., which is the chief medical officer of Pacific Fertility Center. So a really great resource to be able to pull from that for sure. All right, so that's a little bit about Hatch and PFCLA. Enough about that. So let's hand it over to Janice to speak about what you really want to hear about is the surrogate and IP matching process. I'm just going to mention once again the steps here of getting that done, how that looks, and it happens in different stages. And Janice can walk us through like time-wise when this would happen as well. But it's all about striving for that suitable, happy, but also stable match, right? That doesn't break because of differences in expectations and all of that. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Janice, now to walk us through the first step of that, the initial meeting and welcome call.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Edvin. Do you mind just scrolling back up to the last slide, and I'll just
of course. Sorry.
happen where we start off with the steps. So, for all of our intended parents, everybody's in a different stage, when they sign up. Sometimes intended parents are creating embryos, and the intended mom may be going through a cycle, or the intended parents are working with an egg donor, or, intended parents sign up and they've already have embryos created, so they're really excited to jump right into surrogacy. So during that initial meeting that I schedule with intended parents, myself or one of my match specialists, we talk about, where intended parents are at in the process. Of course, we have our notes from the wonderful coordinators, the relations managers that have signed up the intended parents, and we have our notes from the IVF clinic and which doctor intended parents are working with. But it's always really nice to connect with intended parents during this initial meeting and talk about the next steps and the matching process, and where intended parents are at in creation of their embryos. And then, we also talk about presenting a profile, which I'll go over in the match meeting eventually, and how that plays out. Yeah, so then we'll go over to the next slide. Fantastic. So now during our initial match meeting, as I get to know our lovely intended parents and, learn more of your background, it's also important that we hone in on the criteria for surrogacy, for the intended parents. Now, our match specialists we're always going to work with the legal attorneys, making sure that we match intended parents with a surrogate that lives in a great state. So number one, that is so important. We'll talk about this during our initial meeting with the intended parents about how the state laws differ, depending on if intended parents have their own genetic embryos or if intended parents are working with a donor. Some states may be conservative and they may require that intended parents are the genetic, parents to, their baby, to the embryos. And so we will also work with the intended parents in making sure that they're comfortable with where they travel to, and what's convenient for the intended parents. So, sometimes intended parents will ask, well, I have family members that live in, this state. Would it make sense for us to, match with a surrogate that lives in a particular state or the neighboring states surrounding it, which, of course, it makes sense. It's a big trip. It's an exciting trip. And we want you to feel comfortable and be surrounded by support as well. So, it's a big question in what the state laws are, what's comfortable for the intended parents. And we work really closely with with the attorneys in matching the intended parents as well. So that by the time that we present a profile of a surrogate, it is very detailed in our email to the intended parents on what the state laws are, what the process will be when they are matched with a surrogate when it comes to the parentage court process, if it is a pre-birth order state or a post-birth order state. And we also go into details about that.
Yeah.
Now the second, sorry, Edwin, did you want
I
to?
was just going to say, mention that that I agree with you with, especially like also for international folks, knowing that if they have a local attorney, that you're also more than happy to connect with them and make sure
Oh,
that so matching them in a state where, if there's any reason we should match in this state instead of that state because of their citizenship process, etc. I think that's also a great thing to kind of just mention. So sorry, we'll go ahead,
yeah.
Janice.
Yeah, and another aspect too, when as you mentioned, that is, the birth certificate, aspect. Sometimes intended parents will need their surrogate on the birth certificate on a separate one. So attorneys will create multiple birth certificates with intended parents being included as well as a surrogate. And the passports, so we'll also connect the intended parents to a passport expert that will help with the passports and finalizing that after the birth. Now, in the second aspect of the criteria is the age, so we talk to intended parents during our initial meeting about how the average age of our surrogates is between 32 to 40. And the reason why is because a lot of surrogates decide that they want to pursue a surrogacy after they've completed their family, it's not always that way, but for the most part, it's really common. And so we find that at around this age, between 32 to 40, a lot of surrogates have completed their families. Like I said, they are settled into their career. They have this solid support system that they are, surrounded with. And they, we have their history of medical records. We can obtain everything to ensure that, regardless of their age, they've had healthy, full-term uncomplicated pregnancies, most importantly, as well. And as far as the young surrogates, we do have surrogates that are younger and maybe in their 20s. Surrogate must be 21 to apply to do a surrogacy. But it's not as common, like I said, the main reason is because, a lot of surrogates want to complete their families. I would say, on average with surrogates in their 20s, maybe around 5 to 7 a month that clear. So, I highly recommend that intended parents don't highly focus on the age aspect because we will always get a surrogate medically cleared with the IVF doctor before we ever present a profile. Now, the pros and cons, that's a great question that intended parents will often ask. The pros and cons are, sometimes when a surrogate is younger, and it's not really a con, if you will, it's their, but we often see that, if a surrogate's younger, she may have younger children. So she's juggling, her own kids. She's working full time or part time. She is making every meal maybe for her kids or, very much hand in hand activities. Whereas if a surrogate is older, she may have children that are older who are more independent, which gives the surrogate more autonomy to, focus on her self-care, maybe go to the gym too. Whereas a surrogate who has younger kids, her gym may be running after her kids, through the day. So, these are, again, just, not necessarily pros and cons, but things that we can talk to intended parents about as we focus on the matching aspect. Like it says, ultimately, we want to make sure that a surrogate has had a healthy previous history of pregnancies and deliveries, and we definitely want to focus on a healthy surrogacy and pregnancy, going forward, even when it comes to her age aspect.
Yeah. I think that's great because I never thought about that in my own journey about kind of like it's obvious that you're thinking spontaneously that someone younger should biologically, in some sense, so genetically be better in that sense. But you're totally right. Somebody having that more autonomy in their day-to-day
Yeah.
life can, have another focus on herself, on her surroundings. Yeah, so it's a great point, because we do get a lot of questions about, do you have young surrogates? Do you have young surrogates? And I think it's
Yeah.
important to lift this perspective of, like, everybody's medically cleared, healthy,
Yeah.
deliveries and pregnancies. So, it might actually be preferential to have somebody a bit older, if you will, because it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that it's negative in any way.
Right. This is not the surrogate's genetics,
Yeah.
she's not the egg donor. So what we're looking at is the health of her uterus, the health of her lining, looking at her BMI, we're looking at her support system, also her age, of course, but we are also mainly looking at the history of her pregnancies too. So,
Yeah.
sometimes intended parents do get hung up on the age, but it's
Mhm.
more focused on her health aspect. Yeah. We have a lot of 40-year-olds that are in their, physically in their 20s. They've just, they're older and they've really prioritized their self-care and fitness and, all of that. So I think it's important to highlight that, it's just a number. I tell
Yeah.
myself that every
So
day
far.
sometimes.
Yes, we need to do that now at this age, Janice.
Yeah.
All right. What's number three then that you think is a major criteria?
So the marital status, about 50% of our surrogates are single moms, and it's important that we really screen our single mothers. We want to make sure that they're not doing this alone. They're not, juggling a job, their kids, and then, doing a surrogacy, which can be definitely overwhelming. So when we screen our surrogates, we do, talk about their support system. Oftentimes we see that single moms live near their family. Their parents are down the street, or sometimes surrogates live with their parents or have their parents live with them.
Yeah.
And then, they have their friends and their coworkers who are all very supportive, and they have a good co-parenting relationship with their ex, partner. So sometimes a surrogate will have, a custody arrangement with their children where, she will have her kids for, a week, and then the ex-partner will have the kids for about a week. So there's a good gap. And sometimes surrogates will, plan their appointments. Oh yeah, I can go to this appointment because I have this full week, where I don't have any plans, so it's really important that we, understand what the support system is if a surrogate is a single mom. And we also have a list of emergency contacts for a surrogate who's a single mom. Um, Now, if a surrogate is in a relationship, I often see that they heavily rely on their partner day to day for that support,
Yeah.
So, if she's tired, we see that her partner is helping make the dinners and helping care for the children. And, we will definitely talk about this. And, of course, intended parents have their wishes. And if it is a wish to only be matched with a surrogate that's in a relationship, then we will highly focus on that. If they are open to working with both a single mom or a surrogate that's in a relationship, then that does open up um, the match pool to other candidates, and it can potentially get the intended parents to be matched faster with a surrogate, knowing that ultimately she does have support.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then let me just move over my tab here.
Yeah.
The
I always
COVID
worry about
vaccine.
that.
Yeah. So now the fourth important criteria that we discuss on our initial meetings with intended parents is the COVID vaccine. So, just to kind of back up a little bit, Edmund, to what you were saying earlier about Hatch and PFCLA working closely together.
Yeah.
Um, we work really closely with the intended parents, doctors, with PFCLA. A lot of doctors were saying they're not requiring the COVID vaccine, but there are some clinics that are still requiring it. So as the intended parents are waiting to be matched, not only are we working with the attorneys, like I mentioned on about the laws, but we're also working with the clinics, with the IPs, IVF doctor, with their IVF coordinator to better understand what their criteria is for the surrogates. So every doctor will have specific requirements, when it comes to surrogates. And we will work with those doctors to better understand, what the maximum ages that the doctor is allowing, what the BMI max is, medical history, any requirements there. And most importantly, the COVID vaccine, because we really don't want to slow down the process for intended parents when we have a profile to present, you know? So when we have a profile to present, we want to make sure it's an exciting process and it's exciting profile that intended parents are like, yes, you know, we can move forward. We have this amazing profile of a surrogate. I don't want intended parents to feel let down where it's like, oh gosh, you know, I'm presenting this profile, but I still need to get her pre-approved by the doctor.
Yeah.
So we get the pre-approval while the intended parents are in queue waiting. And so when we have a profile to present, we know that she's either COVID vaccinated or she's not, because but the doctor is okay with that situation.
Yeah.
90% of our surrogates are COVID vaccinated. We do have, you know, a minority of surrogates that are not vaccinated. Ultimately, we want to better understand the reason why. And what I often hear is that surrogates don't feel comfortable getting the COVID vaccine because they're just not sure what the long-term effects could be. If it would affect their fertility 10 years from now, if it would affect their heart health is what I often hear 10 years from now. Because it's still a newer vaccine, they're just a little cautious about, you know, getting it right away. A lot of our surrogates that don't get it just want to wait until there are more studies that come out. Now, we do confirm that they will get the flu vaccine, that they will get the Tdap vaccine, you
Yeah.
know, that surrogates are not anti-vax, you know, they're still going to follow the doctor's requirements in other, you know, areas of the vaccines. We do confirm that surrogates have had their childhood vaccines, you know, when it comes to the MMR or Hep B or, you know, anything like that. So, you know, we will definitely check with the clinic when it comes to the COVID vaccine. If intended parents are open to working with a surrogate who is not COVID vaccinated, that's also wonderful because it can speed up their timeline to be matched with a surrogate faster as well. Knowing that, you know, the doctor's okay with it too.
Yeah, perfect. And I really like that you kind of mentioned the part that actually on the back end of things, like, you know, speaking to attorneys of the IPs, you know, looking at doctors' requirements, like that's all happening while you're also on the match list. So sometimes there's this stress about, you know, I'm just sitting on the match list and I'm, you know, have you forgotten about me? Absolutely not. Like there's febrile activity on the back end of things. And I really think
Yeah,
that's great preparation in you know, anticipation of that match that's going to come. Um,
absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for walking us through this. And I know when we spoke about this, I was like always I was also very interested in these actual four things being like the bigger things. But I also asked you, what do intended parents actually add on to that? What do they want?
Yeah.
Which brings us a little bit to the next thing about what could intended parents list as their criteria. Also something that intended parents ask me a lot about what should I have, or if I should have nothing, or what do other intended parents have as their criteria? So please walk us
Yeah.
through that a little bit.
Absolutely. This is so important because this really helps solidify a match by finding the right surrogate, you know, for the intended parents. Because, of course, we want to focus on the state laws and we want to focus on the medical aspect and criteria, making sure she's healthy and she's a great candidate. But we also want to make sure that there's a great compatibility between the intended parents and the surrogate. So, you know, when we talk to intended parents about, you know, what their criteria is with the surrogate, we do talk about you know, if it's important for intended parents that their surrogate pumps, you know, breast milk, you know, and for some intended parents it is. So we will talk about the process that that entails. Of course, it's also very important to remember that, you know, our bodies are not mechanical when it comes to milk sometimes. So surrogates will often try to pump milk. Most surrogates do have a great successful outcome, but sometimes surrogates don't. And, you know, we'll talk to intended parents if there are specific diets, you know, that they have for their surrogates. I don't recommend, you know, micromanaging your surrogate's diet. We can see in our process of screening a surrogate that they've had a healthy, you know, pregnancy, they've had a healthy BMI, you know, obviously in medical records, there is no smoking or drinking in their own pregnancies. That's a big aspect that we want to make sure that, you know, she's healthy overall and made all the right decisions in her own pregnancies to be a qualified surrogate going forward. But I think what's fun is, you know, in our intended parent applications, we ask questions about, you know, some background about the intended parents, you know, their religion, their hobbies, you know, what their personalities are like. And that really does help us to find the right surrogate to hopefully be compatible with them. So I would focus on like, what are my hobbies? What do I like to do? Do I enjoy hiking? Do I enjoy eating out when I can get a chance? Do we enjoy hosting dinners for our friends? And, we often meet surrogates are very much the same. They enjoy being outdoors. They like to go camping with their family when they can. They like to go to the beach, or, the river, whatever's local to them, or, they have certain foods that they crave or love to get out to the city to try. So, it's important to find surrogates and intended parents that are compatible. And I really recommend that intended parents hone in on that, instead of the micromanaging, let the agency kind of facilitate the background of, is the surrogate healthy? Will the IVF doctor clear the surrogate, from the medical aspect? But focus more on like what can really connect me to the surrogate. What can I tell the agency that I really love to do so they can find a surrogate that is compatible with me? Because it is a long journey, a minimum of 12 months of getting to know the surrogate through the surrogacy process, but hopefully much longer with the bond that, that organic bond that is created, hopefully there's a friendship, for a lifetime after the surrogacy. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Perfect.
now,
Yeah, go ahead, please. With a couple of things we usually maybe don't think is as necessary for the success of the journey, basically.
yeah, yeah. And when it comes to organic foods, I'm seeing that to come up more and more lately. Intended parents really want their surrogate to eat as healthy as possible, organic as possible. Um, Purchasing organic foods, 100% of the time can be very costly. And if a surrogate has a family of, say, 3 kids, a husband, and she's cooking a family for all organic for a family of five, every night, every meal, it can be very expensive. So, what we will talk to intended parents about, if it's very important, we will talk to the surrogate about maybe purchasing the dirty dozen items, organic. If she's craving strawberries every day, buy those organic. I'm sure she'll be happy to purchase those organic, and she's educated in that regard to even already do that. But if it's something that intended parents really want her to purchase all organic foods, all organic vegetables and farmed meats and, a specific, clean, healthy style of eating, then we will talk to the intended parents about supplementing an additional monthly fee, so that she has an allowance to purchase, organic meals and, make sure that she's having a cleaner diet, throughout the surrogacy, and we'll support intended parents and surrogates through that process as well. Now, as you can see the big X on that PowerPoint, sometimes intended parents will focus on ethnicity, and will, want to work with a surrogate who's Caucasian, or will sometimes say, I don't want to work with a surrogate who is African American, or I don't want to work with a surrogate who is of Indian background, or, something to that extent. And I will say, that really will um, delay the match time. We understand that, again, compatibility is important. The intended parents want to feel comfortable, of course, absolutely. But it's also important that, when we look at our surrogate profiles, we look at them as women, humans that are willing to help a family in one of the most incredible ways of bringing a baby into this world. And our surrogates are not judgy by any means. They're not judging an intended parent's letter based on the intended parents being, a specific ethnicity, a specific religion. Our surrogates really want to help a family have their child. For surrogates, sometimes they will say, we really want to help a family have their first child rather than maybe a fourth or third or fourth child. But that's where it really stops, it's really there. Or surrogates will say, we really want to, I don't know, have a really close relationship with our intended. We would really want to communicate with our intended parents on a weekly basis and have them feel involved, which oftentimes intended parents want that as well. But, I really do, I can't emphasize this enough, when it comes to ethnicity, religion, and race, I really strongly tell intended parents to, leave those worries behind because having a beautiful baby, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't make a pregnancy healthier by any means. It doesn't make a baby healthier because she's of a certain religion or race or ethnicity, you know. So
Great.
just to be open-minded when it comes to this.
Yeah, and also we want to match, intended parents as soon as possible. And the more chance you give us to do that, the obviously,
Yeah,
quicker that's going to be. Awesome. All
yeah,
right, let's speed ahead a little bit, Janice, here, so we can get people off to whatever they're doing later.
yeah.
We're at the next step of like, we had that meeting, which is great with intended parents. We know what you want them to focus on your team, and we want know what they want.
Mhm,
We obviously know what our surrogates want as well, of course, just to make
mhm.
that very clear. So now it's maybe time, when that time comes and it's time to present the profile to the intended parents, etc. So walk us through a little bit of how that works and what's
Yes.
included there.
So this is the final stages, and this is where it gets really exciting. This is where we get really excited. We finally have a profile. We feel really confident. We're really excited to present the profile to the intended parents. And the profile is so detailed. We've done a really great job at creating these profiles, working together as a team at Hatch. We want to make sure that the profile is very thorough, and it doesn't just include her medical aspect, which is very important, to go over the background of her own pregnancies. But it also is personal. You can really get to know the surrogate when you're reading this profile. You can really see what her hobbies are. You can see what maybe her background of her religion is, what her favorite activities are. We even have a portion in the profile of a list of favorites. So her favorite book, her favorite TV show, her favorite music, her favorite flower, her dream vacation. So it's really a really great personal profile. Now, in the medical aspect, it is very important that, intended parents understand what her own pregnancies with her children were like. So we want to be as transparent as possible when we create the profile. So it will include the every pregnancy the surrogate has had. So, pregnancy 1, 2, and 3 with her own children, with their kids' names, their gender, how far along she was in her pregnancy, whether it was 36 weeks or if she went well over into 42 weeks, if she had a C-section or a vaginal delivery. If it was a C-section, we'll detail the reason why, if the baby was in breech position or too big, or if there was a minor complication, that will be very detailed. Her child's measurements, weight and height, and then for every pregnancy, if she's taking anything, as far as the prescription goes, or if there was a minor complication. So anything that we find in medical records will be detailed in that profile. Okay. And, we'll go over, any medical background, as a surrogate, have any history of any prescriptions outside of pregnancies, just anything we see in the medical records, as far as any medications or prescriptions that didn't have anything to do with pregnancy. We will also detail, the surrogate will actually answer questions about the reason why she's doing a surrogacy, what's inspired her. She'll answer questions about the level of contact and communication she would like from her intended parents. Most surrogates would love a great, communication, would love to be in touch with their intended parents on a weekly basis. They really want to include their intended parents. They want to be excited to share updates to their intended parents because that's what they're doing this for. They want to, have their IPs involved. Um, they'll answer whether or not they want their intended parents to be in the delivery room come the big special day. A lot of our surrogates really want that to happen. Um, they know how special it was, how much of an impact it was on them and for them as a family when they delivered their baby, and they know how special that moment is. So they definitely don't want their intended parents to miss that big moment of being in the delivery room, bonding with their baby immediately. So that's really special. And if the surrogate would like to stay in contact with their intended parents, well after the surrogacy. So surrogates will fill out, those important questions to give the intended parents more background of, what they're wanting, throughout the surrogacy and how much contact. And then, in the body of the profile, it's very detailed with just the general demographic of the surrogate, her name, her age, her location, the state that she lives in, because we are looking at the state laws, and what that entails. And her hobbies, her, like I said, her religion. We will dive into what her job is. So it'll be very specific on the company or the job role that she has, her work duties and her work hours. If she is in a relationship, it will also include her partner's name, age, level of support, his job background, his work duties, his hours, and this will give intended parents some background of like, their work schedule and, how much time they spend together as a family too, if they have evenings together every day and so forth. And, what's inspired her to do a surrogacy. That's really exciting for intended parents to read as well. And it will have a lot of pictures of the surrogate and her family, of pets, of vacation pictures, so that intended parents can kind of see her in her element in photos, see her with her kids, see her with her husband and spouse, with her best friend if she doesn't have a partner, but she has a best friend that's supporting her through the surrogacy. So yeah, it's a really great profile and exciting milestone for intended parents to get to.
Absolutely exciting. I kind of almost want to have another child just to go through the matching process. Not that I would have a kid for that reason, but it is a beautiful thing, and it's really nice to think about that kind of moment when you look at that profile. One thing that's important to mention, just as we spoke of the in the beginning, if you missed that part, is that at Hatch, actually, a medical doctor, our chief medical officer, has pre-approved the surrogate actually beforehand by a medical records review, mainly. She will still go to the clinic. She will still do the in-clinical screening, etc., of course. But it's a great perk to have. Also, a uterus lining check's been done. So things like, fibroids, polyps can actually be found earlier instead of matching you, getting your hopes up, sending her to the clinic, and they find these huge polyps or cysts or whatever, you can't move forward potentially. It's something we want to avoid. So it's a great thing to actually have for Hatch intended parents. Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Janice. I think we'll just quickly just run through this. If you can just do like a 10-second run through of this, Janice, when it looks at, when we start that
Absolutely.
profile over, etc. Like, how does that work with when they got
Yeah.
that profile? What happens then? What can they do?
Yeah, yeah. So when we send over that profile, we'll go over questions, regarding the surrogate's profile, make sure that intended parents have plenty of time to review the profile and think of any questions, and I will say we have a really high success rate of intended parents moving forward with the first profile they see, because I'm proud to say that myself and my match specialist, we really want to ensure that that first profile is the one. So, once we go over questions and if intended parents are excited and they want to move forward with the surrogate, then we will either set a meeting, number two, discuss questions, or if intended parents want to skip the meeting and just move forward, then we will send your Dear Surrogate letter to the surrogate. So you've gotten the chance, opportunity to read about her, learn about her background, and understand like her medical background, understand the legal process, of everything. And now it's exciting because it's the surrogate's opportunity to read about you, learn more about you from your Dear Surrogate letter. So I always recommend, make sure your Dear Surrogate letter's really detailed. The most common question that we get from surrogates is, what is the reason why they're doing a surrogacy? Like, can you tell us more about, their medical background or IVF history and the reason why? So I do recommend including information about what you have gone through to get to the point of working with a surrogate and going through IVF, because it will give her so much perspective of what you've gone through and what you've endured. And at the same time, thanking her and for considering working with you, for reading your letter. I would also include, the level of support that you have. You can see the surrogate's level of support, who will be guiding her, helping her through the surrogacy, interpersonal, life. She'll be curious to know if you have family members, if you have siblings that are helping you go through the surrogacy, and supporting you, and what your background is with your work. and, what your hobbies are in that Dear Surrogate letter, what you like to do on the weekends together. So it's a really great letter to write. It's a really amazing letter for surrogates to finally read. By the time that we send your Dear Surrogate letter to a surrogate, she's heard a little bit about you, that you maybe live in a certain country, that you're working with a certain doctor. So she's really excited to read your Dear Surrogate letter when we get to that point. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
awesome.
and typically surrogates will read that letter and respond within a few hours. They're so excited that they respond right away. It's been a long screening process of several months, so when they get to the matching point, they're just um, ready to go. They're ready to start. And so if she agrees, she reads your letter, and most surrogates do go with the very first letter they read because there's just so much of the match details that go into the process and finding the right match. And once, both parties are ready to move forward, then we set up an introduction call. That's what we call it, is the introduction call between the surrogate and the intended parents.
Yeah.
And the call is about an hour long. Oh yeah, here we go, the match
Oh
meeting.
yeah, you should have. You're just on the right right place.
Yeah. So the match meeting is super exciting when we have both intended parents, or the both parties, the intended parents and the surrogate, ready to rock and roll and meet each other. It's about an hour-long call, so it can be sometimes a little bit longer. Sometimes I do see it to go longer, because there's just such a great connection where it's like old friends connecting for the like, it's and that energy of friends in a previous life, or something,
Mhm.
where they can just talk away for hours. And I am like, okay, guys, I gotta, or I got the next meeting to go to, but usually the minimum is an hour long. And the surrogate, we will, it is like a casual interview. So we will have her talk about her pregnancies, the in detail, how her pregnancies were, how fast she got pregnant, if there were any ailments, if there were any minor complications that she can elaborate on. She'll talk about the level of support that she had with her own pregnancies and how her deliveries were. She'll go into detail about the deliveries as well. And if she had a quick delivery, or if she was in labor for a long time, or if she had a C-section and how that went and how she recovered from that C-section. And so we'll talk about her doctor and OBGYN that she worked with during her pregnancies, because most surrogates will work with the same doctor, is what we see. They created this relationship with their doctors from their own pregnancies. They have that level of trust with their doctors. So, she'll discuss that level of trust and that relationship that she has with their doctors, and which hospital that she delivered at, because it will give the intended parents more information about the doctor and the hospital that they can start planning ahead for, and knowing. Um, and, she'll dive into her personal life, what her job is, what her work hours are, how supportive her colleagues are at work. We'll talk about whether or not her children know if she's doing a surrogacy, and if they know, how excited they are, how they feel. Sometimes surrogates will wait to tell their kids until after they're matched with their intended parents, because they know that their kids will have so many questions
Yeah.
about, who, when, where, when is the baby coming, so we'll talk about that. She'll give some more background. And if she's in a relationship, her partner will absolutely be on the call. He will talk about his level of support, for the surrogacy, how he feels about it, maybe even what his initial reaction was, his or her initial reaction was. And we'll talk about what the partner's job is, how the partner will support the surrogate through the journey. So it's a great way to connect with the partner on the call as well and feel out, their support. We'll talk about, what they do on a typical weekend, what are their kids like? What kind of activities are their kids into? Are they in certain sports? What do they like to do for vacations? Do they have a vacation coming up? This is also something that we hone in on early into the matching process. So it'd be detailed in their profile, but we dive into this more on the call. And so it's a great call in getting to know her, and really understanding her background. She'll talk more about what inspired her to do a surrogacy. You've read a lot about her, a lot about it, in the profile, but it's so nice to like hear it directly from her, you know,
Yeah.
what inspired her, what led her to do a surrogacy, how she's felt so far going through the screening steps, you know. Does she have any concerns, you know, or does she have any questions for the intended parents, and in what will, you know, help her get through this or support them through this process. And then, you know, we always like to talk about the importance of the communication throughout the surrogacy, you know, and what the intended parents are also wanting from communication, and how often, you know, what is the best mode of communication for the surrogate, you know, when it comes to calls or texts or video calls. A lot of surrogates would love for their intended parents to FaceTime or video call during appointments. They're aware that, you know, of course, getting on a plane and flying out for every appointment is impossible. You know, it's not easy, and it can be very costly, but surrogates really want to include their intended parents. So they're happy to have their intended parents call in on a video call while they're at an appointment, you know, and so their intended parents will just turn their phone around, and the intended parents can see their baby on an ultrasound screen, hear their baby's heart rate, talk to the doctor, you know, like on the phone. So it's very so it's very much to where, you know, it's hopefully, you know, easy, and keeps the intended parents involved, and, you know, and exciting for the intended parents as well.
Absolutely.
Um,
You see, I have a little bit about intended parents as well. I think we can just have time for questions. I really want to give people the chance to ask some
oh,
questions.
absolutely.
I think the part of intended parents, I think, kind of makes sense from looking at that slide. But tell us just before we move on a little bit about termination and abortion, just kind of how that discussion goes. I know it's a thing that people kind of feel awkward about asking, you know, in me as, you know, their first initial contact, but that is very important. So if you don't mind
Yes,
giving us a short kind of summary of how that's done and kind of,
absolutely.
yeah.
So we talked to surrogates very early in the screening process about termination abortion, and, you know, and how, you know, it can come up, you know, in some cases, and ultimately it is up to the intended parents to decide. You know, heaven forbid there was a major risk, or a complication to the pregnancy or for the baby's health long term, and, you know, just significantly altered the quality of life for the baby, then the intended parents may want to go through this process, you know, with their doctor. And so, surrogates early into the screening process do agree that, yes, you know, this is very important for intended parents to make that decision with the doctor. Now, during the introduction call, you know, when intended parents and surrogates are on this Zoom meeting, I will talk about the termination abortion aspect, and again, give some background of the rare cases that come up where there could be a genetic abnormality, or, you know, a big a risk to the baby, you know, any defects, or, you know, certain situations that can come up if the one embryo splits and it's twins, you know, and twin A is great and healthy, but twin B is showing signs of slow, you know, progress, or health concerns, then, you know, that's called a reduction. So we would work with the intended parents and the doctor. So we do, you know, reassure both parties that on this call that, you know, we would always find the appropriate medical professionals that the surrogate and the intended parents can talk to, you know, whether it's one physician, whether it's a second opinion or a third opinion. We want to make sure that both parties have that support. And ultimately, on these calls, oftentimes, most times actually, surrogates will just say, yes, absolutely. You know, it's really up to the intended parents to make that decision. So nothing really that the intended parents must ask unless you absolutely feel comfortable asking for the intended, or if the intended parents feel comfortable asking. But we do cover this topic in detail, you know, on the call.
Yeah, I think that's really important as well. And
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of things that kind of nags people a little bit, intended parents, but they don't feel comfortable asking. So I think it's great, you know, discuss with your math specialist. We do discuss it with the surrogates, of course. So don't feel like it's a non-topic, like absolutely not taboo to speak about.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. And then after the match meeting, we say goodbye. I guess you say goodbye to Diapiece and Surrogate. And then they get about 24 hours. I'm sure there's some little wiggle room, even though we don't want to prolong it too much
Absolutely.
for anybody. So I think that kind of for this part, what is the most common scenario? If you could just walk us through that. Is it that both sides decide
Yeah.
within 24 hours they want to move forward, or do we have any
Oh my
variation?
gosh. The common scenario is that intended parents and surrogates will email me right after the call and say, "Oh my, we love her, we love them, and we want to move forward." So
Yeah,
that is what happens 99.9% of the time. It's
awesome.
really exciting, but I do, I always end those match meetings by saying, "Please take your time." I'll check in the next 24 hours to see if you have any questions, concerns, anything that we can go over. But I want intended parents to take that time to sleep on that big decision because it is a long journey and we want to make sure they feel 100% comfortable. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's great. And I like that you mentioned that as well, that the majority will actually say yes to the first
Yeah.
proposal. Like that all worked out, which is a great, I mean, kudos to you and your team, honestly, for making that happen because there's so many aspects to consider, right?
Yeah.
Personality, state laws, we went through all of it, right? So I think that's amazing. We do also
Yeah.
just mention roughly the matching time because intended parents do ask a lot about match times with surrogates. They want to get to this exciting point, but how long does that take? Every agency is different for a lot of different reasons. I think sometimes we as intended parents mistakenly look at the matching time as only theoretical time on paper. Basically, there's a million reasons why it might look at a certain way in a certain agency. Hatch is roughly at about 12 months, depending on IP criteria, of course. Like if we talked about all these criteria, if you're narrowing it down, it's going to become longer for adding all these additional requirements.
Mhm.
But it's also important to remember that, for example, when you match with a hatch surrogate, medical records review with the doctor, pre-approval, uterus lining check has been done. So while, you could be saving yourself time even after. So I think match times are tricky because intended parents try to fall into these pitfalls of like thinking
Yeah.
at that just a number instead of just
Right.
what you actually do to
Yeah.
what's happening during that match
Yeah.
time.
Right. Absolutely.
Perfect. All right. I want to let people jump in a little bit. But if you do want to chat with us here, you can absolutely schedule a consultation if you're an intended parent. If you by chance are you're a surrogate or a potential surrogate wanting to become a hatch surrogate, you can go to our hatch website actually and fill out the simple form. We worked a lot, Janice and the team on the back end to make that form as easy as possible and as smooth
Mhm.
as possible. I think you've done a great job there. So if you are a potential surrogate, please go to hatch.us and fill out the form there. If you want to have a consultation as an intended parent, you can email me or better go to the website as well and fill in that form there. And you can have a chat about your specific situation. All right. So I want to take the opportunity to have people ask questions. So I know people are a bit shy. We've told them a lot already. But if there's anybody that wants to ask a question, especially to Janice, of course, who matches intended parents with her team, this is your chance to shoot it. And I'm happy to answer any intended parent related questions if you do have them. But if we have any questions, please jump in now and ask them. And we'll stick around for another minute or two to just see if somebody does have any a question or two that we can answer. But if you don't, that's fine as well. If you do have to leave, like I said, we'll stick around for another minute or two. We want to thank you if you do have to leave for being a part of this webinar. We do hope to see you in the future. And wherever you are in your research, we hope that this was useful as a resource. We do these monthly webinars, actually, a lot of different topics. I think next time it's emotional support in the surrogacy and journey, which is really important. So we're having a psychologist speak on that webinar about how do they kind of not assess intended parents, but give them the tools they need for that, because this can be emotional. I see somebody raising their hands. Please just put down the question if you do have one in the question form. We can't give you the word, unfortunately, in this webinar setting. So please do jump in with a question on the question board if you do have one. Let's see if here we have one. All right, so we have a question about surrogates being US based or not, and if they are US based, how far can they be from the intended parent's location?
All of our surrogates are in the US. They're all US citizens, so that's really important to know. We don't work with surrogates in different countries, nor Canada, Mexico. They're all in the US. And how far can they be from the intended parents? Well, that just depends on the state laws and how flexible intended parents are. So, like I said, if intended parents want a surrogate that's in their same state or a neighboring state, we will focus on that. It could take a little bit longer, but we can definitely focus on that. If an intended parent is very flexible and open, like say for example, an intended parent lives in the West Coast and they want to start their surrogacy journey sooner, and not limit that timeline, then and if they're comfortable working with a surrogate in the East Coast, we can absolutely make that match happen. All of our surrogates, regardless of where they live in the US, they're always going to travel and fly out to Los Angeles, for their medical screening and for their transfer procedure. And it goes really smoothly. We coordinate, the flights, in advance for the surrogates so that they are well rested before their appointments. We'll schedule book a really nice hotel. They're taken care of. They have a support person traveling with them, whether it's their partner or their best friend or, a parent or a surrogate's mother, so they have that great support during those trips to Los Angeles. But yeah, to answer your question, it's a surrogate can be really anywhere, as
Yeah.
long as they're in the US.
Yeah, it can be really far away from the intended parents if we look at some of our international clients that are actually, well, all over the world. So as far as you can get, it can still
Yeah.
work. And it's all about communication, like Janice has talked about, support surrogate to IPs, IPs to surrogate. So it can all
Mm.
be done. Myself, I lived in China during my first surrogacy. Great communication, even though it was tricky with the time difference.
Yeah.
And the second time from Europe. So it can all be done. And even though we're not close to each other.
Yeah.
We also have a question about cost, which I can cover. So what is the cost of matching and the total cost following other procedures? So I wouldn't really look at the cost aspect as a cost of matching. I would look at the cost aspect as a cost for the surrogacy overall, the program, everything from beginning to the end. This depends heavily on the agency. There are variable plans. You kind of pay as you go, more or less. Some things are fixed, but most things are kind of like, we'll see how it all works out. And other plans are fixed. So for example, with Hatch, we only have fixed fee programs. We do really believe in that transparency and kind of showing intended parents that this is the exact cost that you're going to have facing in this journey, because it is expensive, as we talked about in the past, just starting off, and we want this peace of mind. So it depends on the agency. Hatch has different programs depending on if you need an egg donor or if you're using your own oocytes or eggs or whatever. So it can range anywhere from our surrogacy only programs, which are 175, for our all-inclusive egg donation, surrogacy, and IVF programs with PFCLA, which range from 220 to 235, basically. So feel free to reach out to me if you do have more inquiries about that. I know it's a very important thing to consider. Unfortunately, it's not an easy answer, but we do everything we can attach to make it fixed and to make it very transparent. So there's really a good chance to plan this in the best possible way for your family's financing, etc. So that's a great question as well. All right. Do we have anybody else? I'll give you the floor for another minute before we let all of these lovely people go back to their evenings, jobs, kids, whatever it might be. Is there anybody that wants to throw in the last one? Yeah, Janice, do you want to say something?
I just wanted to, say that, whatever intended parents decide to do, we hope that, this is a great resource, from this call together, and that, I wish you the best of luck. I know that it's a big decision and it's a heavy decision sometimes for some, and, that, there's never a dumb question. There's never a stupid question or inappropriate question. It's really important that you feel connected and supported through the agency that you're working with. So, definitely, share any concerns or questions with your agency, and definitely trust your agency to find that right surrogate, making sure that that agency is working closely with the legal team, with the doctor, in finding the most important match. That's not just compatible, but just the logistics of, this big process, making sure that all of it fits together.
Exactly. And that it fits what you're actually looking for in terms of a journey. It's not just about having a child, which is obviously the end result. It's about how does that
Right.
process look during that, anywhere
Yeah.
from, 24 months or, 12, 24 months, whatever.
Um,
It's important. Yeah. So thanks for that, Janice. And thanks so much for being with us, Janice. I don't see any questions. So thank all of you for coming and keep in touch. We'd love to talk to you more. All right. Bye-bye for now.
Hi.